been as an alternate with a total of 3 alternates. There were some frustrations, and a lot of it was I would vote on something one night, and then the next time Joy would vote on something, and then the next time Colby would vote on something. And so it was frustrating to the developers because they're getting 3 different opinions. So we have our normal planning commission, and then when we sit in, we're giving different recommendations to the developer. And I think that's happened a few times now, one time just recently, and I feel like it's almost delaying the process because we're having so many different opinions.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Uh-huh.
I'm assuming that the reason that there was each 3 of you, basically different votes at different times, was because of an opportunity to try and give each an alternate an opportunity to sit and be part of the meeting. It just so happened that it fell in a span where you had the same issue in front of you 2 or 3 times. Would that be accurate? Okay.
Yep. And then after Colby left, it was down to me and Joy. And then, so the problem with that was I would be at every single meeting and I would vote a lot. And then we have people who are missing frequently. Joy would miss quite a bit. And so I was voting so regularly on a lot of these items. So when she was there, she'd come in and she'd vote on something. But again, it just throws things off with the developer because we're asking for different things. So if she votes on it and I'm not there to see what the developer's presenting and I can't comment on it during the meetings, or ask clarifying questions to the developer, they're coming back and I'm giving them, hey, I want to see this and I want to see this. And so I think it's frustrating for the planning commission. I think it's frustrating for planning because we're making them come back more. I don't know, does that make sense to everyone?
Kind of. I mean, how many people do we have on that board that vote? Because one alternate shouldn't be holding everything up if they have a differing opinion, right? There's still a majority of vote.
Oh, no, it's not about the votes. I think that more so like someone will bring up new information. I dig into things, like I want to make sure that everything's right, and I feel like a lot of times I'll be the one that's asking those questions, and I agree that, you know, it is a body. I don't know, do you have anything to add to that?
Because I'm
That you've seen?
having a hard time, because while we want things to move smoothly, we're not doing this for the developer's benefit,
Right.
it's for the residents' benefit, and I almost view what you said as a good thing.
Yeah.
But that's kind of why we have a planning, because we don't have to have a planning commission. That's kind of why, at least for me, why we have one, is to get different viewpoints and make sure that it's.
I guess I would ask Michael, based on that information, that Heather, did you see a process, I guess, be hampered or a project be lengthened out, you know, unduly because of alternating people that sat on a given night and different information being received?
On an item that has some complexity, those are the items that often appear before the planning commission multiple times. And I do agree with Heather that it's possible that an alternate who's present and participating one meeting might raise a particular issue. And then if the next meeting, there's a change in who's present and participating, we might suddenly have a new issue that hadn't been previously voiced. Now, just for the council's information, during the work meeting, alternates are free to participate and raise questions, issues, engage in the conversation. We have not allowed alternates to participate as commissioners during a regular meeting. Obviously, they're in a non-voting role if they're not actually sitting and filling a vacancy. We have 7 appointed commissioners. Typically, the chair doesn't vote unless there's a tie or there are a couple of items that he's able to vote on or she's able to vote on. So it can be an issue. I think the city is looking for our alternates. I would interpret it 2 ways. One is obviously to ensure that we have a quorum. In fact, I think Lauren told me recently, we have had in the past commissioners who maybe weren't as regular participants.
was
But
gonna
that
be my next
doesn't
question.
seem to
Sounds like it's a
be our-
consistency
our-
issue. Is that consistency issue with the regular members?
Well, let me finish this point. I think maybe we had enough absenteeism potentially that there was a threat to having a quorum present. So by having alternates, we have the ability to keep moving the work of the city forward by having alternates then sit in a voting role if there's an absent regular member of the planning commission. So that's good. The other thing about the alternates is it's a training ground. As you can see, we appoint regular planning commissioners for 3 years, alternates for 1. So it's good experience and exposure. But this is kind of the downside to what Heather was mentioning. In fact, I think, I'm gonna put words in your mouth, Heather, I think you had implied that this might actually work better if we didn't have 3 alternates, but maybe kept it to even 2, to at least reduce that
The next question is,
Yes.
what's your suggestion?
I was gonna
Yeah.
ask
That's
that
my
same thing.
suggestion,
Uh,
is to not have that third.
So you would, based on your experience as of late, you would recommend that 2, it has been working well. I guess I'll ask, going back to that, what you just talked about, Michael, is 2 seem to, because we've been operating with 2 for a while, has 2 given you the depth that you've needed to not run up against those having a quorum present issues with just having 2 committed people?
Yeah, there was one meeting this past year that we were a little bit concerned, even with alternates having a quorum. We have not had any meetings canceled for lack of a quorum.
Let's just be clear with that. That means only 2 of the 7 appointed commissioners attended, plus 2 alternates would give you a quorum. I mean, we're talking 5 out of 7 absences at a regularly scheduled
Like
commission meeting?
I said, we were concerned. I think our commissioners
That
came
seems a little
through.
extraordinary.
But like I said, that was not very unusual, very unusual.
So, Chase, I have a
Yeah.
procedural question that maybe you can help guide us on. Michael just talked about the fact that obviously in a work meeting, the alternates are allowed to engage and ask questions and those types of things. That changes a little bit, obviously, once they get out there and the voting members are up on the dais. So my question is, would it be, I guess, inappropriate to have all members up there able to participate even in the discussion during the regular meeting, but obviously only 7 can vote? So that way, those that have the questions that, whether they're, that aren't a voting member, they're still able to get asked, they're still able to get addressed. So that again, if they're in that voting position the next time, and they didn't get a chance to ask it 2 weeks previous, and now they wanna bring it up because they're in that position, what's your thoughts on that? Like I say, in having all members seated to where they can be part of that conversation, but obviously, we can only have 7 members voting.
Sure, you could do that. And I think the concern I would have is making clear who the voting members are,
Right.
right? If there were ever an item that were being discussed by the planning commission that could be subject to an appeal, having that discussion, focused in on who those members are that are making the decision and having them articulate their reasonings for that decision would be the most important. But you could,
Is
you
that
could structure
something that we can accomplish through where they're sitting? I know we have the 7 seats on the dais and then several seats to the side. Where we sit those alternates who are not.
I think what he's asking is, can we sit them somewhere else to separate them from the voting body? And yes, I think that can be arranged.
What's the other council members' thoughts on something like that? I mean, at least, again, I think the point is that we expect our alternates to be able to jump in and perform at at any time on any issue because of a vacancy. But but there's, the way we're doing it, there's limited ability sometimes for them to engage, especially in the public meeting when they're not in that voting member role. But if we made an avenue for them to participate in all the discussion, work meeting and regular meeting, but clearly identify who the voting members are at a given time, would it alleviate that issue?
Doesn't sound like an unreasonable solution to me. So the downfall of not doing that is that there's a potential delay in the process for developers moving their projects forward. don't necessarily know that additional questions or scrutiny is that big of a problem. I think that the more input we get is probably a good thing, different points of, that's why we have so many members on a body, is to get a wide variety of opinions and ideas and questions. But ultimately, the decision is a body decision, and it seems like most of the decisions we get are 6-0, sometimes 5-1. But the commission seems to deliberate those items pretty robustly and come to a pretty substantial consensus on most issues. So I'm not sure that the alternate being on or off is necessarily obstructing or coming with different outcomes, if that makes sense, right? I think we're still getting to the same outcomes and the same conclusions. I'm not opposed to having them sit, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the biggest problem in the world.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and the only reason that I just have the thought that I did is, again, they're on there as alternate or full member, doesn't matter. I think their input's important. And if we at least give them an avenue to be able to make sure that their questions are answered, because again, they are part of that body, but again, if they're clearly identified as a non-voting member for the night, but still a member of that body and can still ask their questions, that might be a reasonable solution. But I agree with you, I don't believe that it would affect the outcome of the regular.
But I
vote.
do appreciate the comment about
I do too.
the process, right?
Yeah.
It maybe is unnecessarily adding time that we could alleviate just by having them sit up on the dais and make their comments.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, I guess that's where I was kind of going in the beginning was, I don't see how it's really affecting that outcome. But it sounds like the concern is more with the number of people rotating in and out.
Yeah.
Right? So that's, to me, it kind of comes back to the attendance question. Do we have regular attendance from our actual board
Yes.
members, or do we have some who are not there
No.
frequently?
No, our attendance has been good, and it's been better through COVID, as you can imagine.
So if
Among
the
all
attendance has been
commissioners.
good, then do we
Yes.
need 3 or is 2 adequate? Is more kind of the concern, cause
Yeah.
if there's 3 and it's a rotation, right?
Yeah, I would say that for the most part during 2019, I was voting really consistently. 2020 did change things, but I would say, like, maybe as a recommendation that maybe you guys reach out to the planning commission, or when planning commissioners are up for reappointment, maybe send out a link to have us all review each other and maybe get feedback for you guys to see, how the commission is performing, a kind of, I guess, a peer review almost. Cause I kind of wonder, what you guys really know.
We know that we're told we're not supposed to go to those meetings.
We actually, I think it's fair to note that over the past couple of years, we actually have changed that process because of some of those questions you just brought up. We took the alternate's term down to 1 year to give a little bit more flexibility, and we've asked for attendance things and those types of things from Mike
We
Warren
did
and
have
the
a lot of those
staff.
problems.
Because we did have those problems, so.
There's another thing about this though, is if you miss a meeting and then you come the next time, we're just creating the same problem now. We're making it 9 members deep instead of 7 members deep, right? I mean, if we have 2 alternates and one of you miss a meeting and then come the next week and are able to make input in that meeting, we're just having the same process, right? I don't know that we've solved the problem.
So going back to, it sounds like it's just the number of alternates rotating in and out. is
Yeah,
what
that
we're
and being
concerned
able to
about.
comment on items as they come up. There's like projects that I was like really excited about and really got into them, and then when it came time for the meeting, all of the members were there, so I couldn't vote, I couldn't ask questions, I couldn't say anything. And so,
But you were able to participate in the work meetings leading up to it.
yes, but the problem is if we have other items, we can't really get into a lot of discussion because we only have
Not
an
that
hour.
night, I mean, if it's run properly, if it's on the agenda for a decision that night, it shouldn't be on the work meeting.
Doesn't the chair, the chair has discretion of ultimately who sits, right?
Yeah.
So if it is a bigger item, I guess I would expect that the understanding, or at least the guidance to the group is, if you have if you have a member that's missed one meeting or even two, and there's a bigger issue on there where an alternate has participated in that it's probably them that should be, that's been part of that discussion and things that should actually sit to vote when that item comes up, but that should be at the discretion of the chair, right?
Right, and the chair has a lot of discretion to also exclude alternates from engaging in additional discussion on particular items as well, right? If that's,
But I guess the question is, can they exclude you can't exclude a regularly appointed commissioner from voting, right?
if they show up at the meeting
Yeah.
where the vote is taken.
Yeah.
I don't believe our rules of procedure allow that.
Cause like if they've been absent for a while and then they show up, and one of the alternates gets, you know,
I can, let me
again,
pull those up.
But that was, that
let's
was
say
my
there's
question.
six that's showing and,
That's what you were getting at.
and
Okay.
Yeah, that's my
Heather's been
question.
participating, and then when it comes time to a big vote, Heather's now an alternate and not one of the voting
Seems like it
members.
has been.
That was my
That's
question
interesting
of,
part too.
does the chair have discretion of who sits to actually vote
In
that week?
context,
So if we go to two,
Even if
we
all
can
the
already-
members are there?
right.
Well, we could
Yeah, let me look at our
always
rules really
hold the
quick.
position vacant and appoint later if needed.
If you guys are okay, just since we have another planning commissioner here, Lauren, I would just say part of this discussion, what would your feedback be, Lauren?
A lot of what you're talking about is spot on. I think Heather, there's a few members still on, I think, on the commission that aren't as active right now, where Heather very much comes and studies the issues, is valuable. I mean, she brings an insight that a lot of us don't have, which is phenomenal, where there's a few people that aren't as active, I would say. And so that is a struggle seeing that happen, as she puts so much time into it. She's very good at that. But at the same time, I don't have a problem with having 9 seated up there. I would love.
To be part of the discussion,
Part of the discussion.
as long as it's clearly identified who would vote on, who's voting on issues that night and who's not.
For the commissions, I mean, there's no attendance issues. I remember back when I mean, sometimes there's just you speaking up there with, I love Heather, I mean, I love Jessica and Andrea, but there was silence, you know, it was you running a meeting with, you know, it was, that the commission's come a long way. I mean, we've got some educated people.
Got some really good people.
But it's a phenomenal commission right now.
Agreed.
But Heather's an asset to it as well, and I know Daryl, I don't know Forrest very well, but Daryl would be an asset as well. He brings transportation voice to the table that I think would be a critical, like, voice on that commission that could speak during meetings. So, I'm kind of, on the 2 versus 3, I love that it's a training ground, because you never know when we're gonna have some turnover. I do love the training ground that it's.
Yeah, I just vocalize one concern about that is that if we go from 3 to 2, we're shortening our bench, if that makes sense. We
That was a side conversation.
Yeah,
Just
we may
having,
not,
like,
we may not have as many trained candidates to fill positions later on, you
So
know?
if we have 3 now and 2 are showing up, if we go from 3 to 2, and I mean, we only have 1.
Yeah,
And I could be right, and Heather, if I'm putting words in, but I think it's Heather wants to participate. She doesn't necessarily care about the vote. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It's being able to participate and have her voice heard.
Well, and the reality is right now we're going down to one trained alternate, because Joy is
I mean,
leading us.
as far as the meeting goes, at you guys' meeting, however you wanna run, really, I don't care about that. I don't wanna have more voting members. I mean, I look
Right.
at some of these
Right. Yeah.
political bodies that are like 9 and 12 members deep, like, how do you get anything done? But allowing people to be part of the discussion, I have no problem with that whatsoever. It's you guys' meeting, and that makes sense. When it comes to the number of alternates,
Yeah.
same thing. I mean, if 2's adequate, I'm fine with that. If we get to where we appoint 2 and only 1's showing up, then we know we need to go back to 3 so that we have 2 showing up.
But I've heard 2 suggestions from the council that I think could help this concern that Heather has identified tonight. And a 3rd issue that Chase and I have been talking about. So one is that the commission chair currently has been equitable in just kind of rotating through our alternates. So maybe just identify that may not always be in the best interest of the items that are on the agenda that night.
Yep.
So if somebody just hasn't been engaged and it maybe isn't aware of some of the prior conversations, it might be better to resit an alternate who has been participating.
Yep.
Another item is that allowing alternates to at least engage in discussion during the meeting in a non-voting role could also, I think, address some of the concerns that Heather has presented. The third item that we've been talking about, we've been emphasizing to the commission that decisions need to be based on standards. They need to be, we've been providing those standards in the staff reports. We probably need to be a little more aggressive in the meetings if we feel like there is a potential motion or conversation that doesn't seem to be based on standards. And that's where we probably need to provide a little more assistance and guidance to the planning commission. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the rules of procedure for the planning commission don't state that the chair can or cannot exclude someone, but it does state that members have a right to vote when they are present.
Okay.
So if they're present, it would be my interpretation of the rules of procedure that they have a right to sit and vote.
But they could voluntarily give that up
Proxy,
too.
they can do a proxy vote and have someone else vote in their stead.
All right.
I would say too, I think we can be more picky if people aren't actively, I think we've got enough people willing. I think if people are active, if they're not involved.
Could I add that maybe we review this semi-annually instead of annually? And so we can check on the attendance and activity levels and
Well, you provided
make
us
a change or something
a
needs to be
sheet,
changed. I mean, I
Michael.
don't know.
Did it? I think it had the terms on it, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So
And
there
there
will
are
be
some
another
staggered
appointment.
terms in there. There's some Julys, there's
Yeah.
some Marches, there's some Mays. So there's a little bit of stagger in
Right,
there, but.
right.
And the city council can remove anyone from the planning commission at any time and not just when it comes up for reappointment.
So we have to literally rely on you guys for information because we're not allowed to go. At least the legal advice has been not to.
Is that this attorney's advice?
So again, I'll prepare a resolution for consideration of 3 candidates. I'll also provide the additional applicants. That was your request, Clint. And then the council will be at liberty to make the decision.
Make the decision.
So,
Chase, if we were going to, I guess, make a procedural change and allowing everyone to sit and be part of the discussion, is there anything formal that would need to take place in order for the council to enact
I
that?
was just looking over our ordinance, I don't think there would be a change needed there. If there were any, it would be in the planning commission rules and procedures. Glossing through those, I didn't see anything that would require that, again, this would just be under the authority of the chair to allow them to participate. But if that's different, I can bring that back and
Okay.
let you know.
All
and
right.
I've been anticipating we may need to do an amendment on those policies because of this change in state law requiring more formal training
Right.
of our commissioners. I wanted to make sure that was reflected in our policies. So.
All right, discussion. Anyone else have any other comments or questions before we move on? Thank you, Heather, appreciate that.
Thank you.
If I may, if I could just revisit item 1.2 for just 1 second.
I'm sorry, we passed that, Steve.
You have a right to say no if you don't want.
Go ahead.
Something came up, and I'll probably talk about it a little bit in the general meeting, but there was an incident. There's been a lot of incidents of some issues with very loud vehicles driving very quickly on streets, and we had one crash into a house last week. The reports we're getting is a lot of teen drivers from outside of our city are coming to Harriman and kind of raising hell, for lack of a better term. And I think there are some opportunities for us to discuss some of our existing ordinances around noise and see if there's some opportunity we might be able to better arm our enforcement people with some tools to help mitigate. You can't pull somebody over because their car's loud unless it's, what's the term, reasonable? And maybe we can better define that to certain hours and certain decibels or something. I don't
You're
know.
wanting that on a
But
work
I
meeting
would love to
discussion.
have that on a discussion and maybe have Chief, if you guys are willing to maybe give us some input. You and I had a really long conversation about it the other day, but I think it would be really good for us to get into that a little
I
bit.
think that'd be healthy to have, as we have that discussion, at least updates from you on frequency of those types of calls that you're responding on. So, okay,
Sorry, thank you.
all right. Okay, no more redos, Steve.
I'll try not to.
It's more agenda items, not less.
I'm sorry, I
Right.
apologize.
All right, let's move on to item 2.2, which is Harriman Pavement Preservation Program. We've got Bryce Terry, our staff engineer. Go ahead, Bryce.
Alrighty, thanks, council. So we wanted to discuss just kind of where our roads are at, condition wise. We've done a study in the last couple of years to kind of give us an update on where we're at on condition of our roads. And then moving forward, what's our plans to keep our roads in good condition? So this presentation is really to talk about that, talk about the study that we had done last year and kind of where we're at compared to other cities as far as our roadway network. And this is more of the asphalt condition, so the condition of the road, not necessarily how connected our roads are, but more the condition of the surface of the road. And so for a quick overview, we'll talk about the quantity of asphalt or road in Harriman. As you can imagine, with growth, it grows every year. With every new development, we get more roads, right? And some of those are public, some of those are private. But yeah, so we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about that pavement study and the results of that study and how we can move forward based on that study. So this might be a little bit hard to see, but we created a map. So all the gray area, which you can't really see, is any road that was installed from 2015 or before. So you can't really see that great, the gray area, but each different color is a year after that. So 2016 is that dark red color, that was all installed in 2016. And then 2017 is in the green. And so this is just to kind of give an idea of how much pavement or roadway that we are adding every year with development, right? And so, and keynote here is we're just showing public roadways, so there are some private roadways that have been added, but they do not show up on this map. So and then this is quantifying it, so big numbers. If you put it into square footage, in 2016, we had about 30 million square feet of asphalt to maintain. That was public roadway. And then by 2020, we had about 36 million square feet of asphalt to maintain. So you can see the growth and kind of the burden it puts on maintaining roads, but also just how we continue to grow with new roads. And so because of this and because of our roadway network and our pavement preservation program, we wanted to get a better idea on the overall condition of our roads. If we could get it, we go out and drive it and see it, but to get a more in-depth understanding, we hired a consulting firm called Infrastructure Management Services. And I'll call them IMS from here on out because it's a bit of a tongue twister there. But basically, we hired them, and that top picture is a van of theirs that they come out and drive all of the roads in Harriman, and they have laser array cameras similar to LiDAR or radar, where they can scan the road as they drive, and it can pick up crack information, how many cracks there are in the road, how rough the road is, if there's rutting or raveling in the road as it drives. So it's a very advanced system. And it enabled us to get a lot of data real quick for our whole roadway. And it was a great tool for us. We also, on our major roadways, like our arterials or collectors, like 134th, 126, Rosecrest Road, we also had additional testing that is that lower picture that has that truck kind of pulling a little mini trailer there. That's called a deflection test, where it basically hits or thumps the pavement and gets a reading on the resistance of the pavement. And so how strong is the base underneath, how strong is the asphalt. And so, yeah, we got all that data back, and got rankings for our road, and the way they rank each roadway is based on a ranking system called Pavement Condition Index, or PCI. And it's basically a general score out of 100. So 0 is a completely failed road. That would mean asphalt's pretty much gone at that point. And 100's a perfect brand new condition. And in reality, even brand new roads rarely will reach that 100 score. They're usually in that 85 to 100 range that we're showing here. So this is just to get an idea on our results. This is kind of the scale that we used and is general practice in asphalt maintenance to kind of get an idea on where the roads are at. And again, this is just a general score. There's more in-depth ways at looking at it, but for an overall network, it's nice to have a quantifiable number assigned to a roadway. So some examples of these are all roads in Harriman that the van actually picked up these pictures, and just some examples of PCI score in our city. So a poor road, again, these pictures aren't great and they're kind of hard to see, but you'll see the raveling that kind of occurs right to the bottom left of that top left photo and that's considered in poor condition, or a 34 rating. And then fair, the low end of fair, high end of fair, good to very good on that right side where you don't see really any cracking. And so, yeah, that's kind of an example of the PCI scale. And so based on that, we had the van drive all the roads, and these are the results that we got back for a citywide ranking system, PCI rating. And so in general, our roads are the top end of average or fair up to good. There are a few exceptions in there where there are some poor roads, not very many very poor roads, and then a lot that are in good condition. And so you can kind of see there, the green roads are in good condition, and the dark green roads are in very good or excellent condition, and then the yellow's in that fair range. And that fair range is really important for us to look at. And we'll talk about why we want to look at those yellow roads and those green roads here in a minute. So this is just a quick kind of pavement life cycle for a paved road. And so generally, a paved road is actually only designed to last for 20 to 25 years. And that's assuming if we do nothing and traffic's on it all the time, the road will fail in 25 years. And this is pretty standard practice. There's not, if we tried to require more than that, it would be unusual for us compared to other cities or other areas. And so this is pretty standard practice to require 20 to 25 years on the design life of a road. And the reason it deteriorates is, there's many reasons. Probably one of the biggest ones is traffic loading on the road. So just repeated loads on the road kind of deteriorates the road. But one that's just as important is oxidation, or essentially the sun, the UV rays kind of breaking down the asphalt. And then in Utah, this is a big one, thermal expansion and contraction. So we have hot summers and freezing winters, which hurts the asphalt. And then groundwater, and then even our snow removal, our plows, they do their best not to hit the actual asphalt, but at the end of the day, it can kind of chip off some of the roadway. And then stormwater, and then anything that's underneath the road, we call the subbase. So there's animals or whatever else can get underneath the road and destabilize the road from underneath. And so all of these kind of hint at that curve, and that's kind of the life of the asphalt or of the road. And you can see there how there's a steep drop off. So you get to fair, or in this picture it's the purple area, that slope becomes a lot steeper as you get into the fair range, and that essentially means your life is deteriorating a lot faster for those roads once you get into that area. And so because of this, we've kind of updated our pavement program, pavement preservation program. We're keeping our roads in good condition. and based on their PCI rating. So they're on the left of that picture, kind of see the scale of PCI that we talked about earlier, and how targeting early treatments on roads can save us money in the long run. And that's because if you can kind of see that graph, we can save the same amount of life or time period of the road if we treat it earlier for 1/8 of the cost if we wait till it deteriorates and gets into poor condition. And so this is a big advantage for asphalt maintenance is to treat those roads early before they get to that steep slope and start deteriorating quickly. And so as a city, it's a much better investment to spend a lot of money up front rather than waiting until it gets into poor condition and then making those repairs such as mill and overlays or complete asphalt repair. Those are very costly. And so in most of the studies, they've shown that you can do about 8 treatments at the beginning, and it'll cost about the same as if you replaced all the asphalt at the end. And so as far as cost efficiency goes, we want to target kind of that early period. And so based on this, we've kind of shifted our focus to keep the best roads in the best condition. And this goes a little bit against our nature. So going back to that map, naturally, at least for me, I don't know about you guys, but you see the red and you want to address the red immediately, right? It pops out off the page and saying, okay, we need to fix these poor condition roads first. But based on that discussion that we just talked about, it's generally a better investment for the city to get caught up on the good roads and then focus on those poor quality roads. And so we've already, in just the couple years that we've kind of implemented this, got some questions on why we're treating roads that seem to be in great condition. Why are we putting our money into those roads rather than the roads that are in poor condition? And so that's a little bit of the background of keeping good roads in good condition. We still want to address those poor roads, right? But if we can focus on this area, it'll save us a lot of money in the long run. And so IMS, the company that did the study and the evaluation of our pavement, projected kind of budget levels and how they would affect our overall network of roads, and how if we planned certain budgets, how it would affect our average PCI rating. So I forgot to mention our average PCI rating was right at 70, which is really good for cities. Part of that is we have a lot of new roads that bring up the score, but also part of that is that we've been pretty good about putting those preservation treatments down early on roads and putting down chip seals or slurry seals. You've probably seen them in the last couple weeks going down around Harriman. We've done a pretty good job about that. And so IMS, what they do is they project, okay, based on your growth and your amount of roads, where will your budget get you in the future if we kind of keep you where you're at? And so that dark green line, that's not the black is a do nothing line. The dark green line is what they projected based on our current budget. And then that purple and red line is more of what they're recommending. Sorry. And then actually that green dash line is ideal world, right? You can keep your PCI average for the whole network at 70 or higher. But that's not necessarily realistic, right, for most cities. And so we do believe that they may have been, their unit prices and whatnot might be a little bit higher than what we're seeing in Harriman. They are a national company, and so they kind of take the averages over the country. And so we think maybe their numbers might be a little bit high, but it still kind of paints us a picture of where we need to be. And just some kind of realization of if we don't pay attention to this, we could foresee problems way in the future, right? And so, yeah, we just wanted to have a discussion. Justin actually has a little bit more background on that, but, and Justin can come up and talk about these bullet points. But are there any questions on what I've talked about so far, or any thoughts to that?
Is there much data to show, I guess, how, you showed the curve on there?
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, a normal curve of a roadway, kind of if you just let it run its lifespan, right?
Right.
How much does that curve change, I guess, with frequent and appropriate maintenance?
Yeah, so let's go back to that picture. So that's what those little humps there that kind of look like shark fins almost, at the top there, that's assuming you're doing those treatments. So that's resetting the line back up to and extending the life of that curve or of the roadway. And so, that's kind of manipulating it with the
Can you,
treatments.
I guess, if you had the money to do it, to continually do that maintenance, is it realistic to expect that you could preserve that out in perpetuity, or is at some point,
Yeah.
have you just got so much that you put on top of it now that everything underneath it's mush?
Right, so there are real world problems with just keeping that up for forever, right? A slurry seal, for example, will build up on the road, and so eventually you're above kind of the crown of the road, and then the gutters sunk from the road. But in general, in an ideal world, that's the best case scenario, is you can keep it in that grade of condition where you're never needing major treatments. But again, this is ideal scenario, right, and may not be completely realistic for all of our roads.
So if I'm reading this right, our current budget for this maintenance is $750,000 a year, is that correct?
Yeah, and Justin can maybe talk to that a little bit,
Yeah, that
bit
was
more.
in 2019, so we started them in 2019, and our budget at that time was 750,000. Last year, we were at 867,000, and this year in the budget, we've proposed, I think, 960,000, something like that. So we've already began to start increasing, and
Yeah, but this, if I'm reading this right, the solid red line, or even the purple line, would be, 2.5 million or 3.3 million, like huge increase, right?
enormous increase. And so some of the things we're looking at is, as Bryce mentioned, they've suggested some treatments in here that we think we can do for cheaper. Or like he said, is their unit costs may be a little higher than what we're seeing. So even if we went with that red or that purple line, I think those numbers could come down quite substantially from what that is, and I think we could keep and get the same benefit, right? So we've gradually increased, $100,000 a year over the last several years. But I think to really our goal, like he said, would be that purple or red line, somewhere in that range. But I don't think we do that next year. I think we gradually start working this into the budget. We have obviously some funds. We have the county option funds that have just become available for this type of work, right, over the last couple of years. BNC road funds. So it might be one of the discussions is if we receive those funds, maybe we try and allocate those specifically to try and help compensate this, to be able to bring that dollar amount up. If it was in the ideal world, I think that every year we'd probably be asking for $2 or $3 million if we could to make this happen, but we know that's not realistic. And so like Bryce said, we've kind of shifted to where we're starting to do treatments on roads within that first 3 years. It's a fairly inexpensive treatment, 11 cents a square foot, where some of the major treatments are, 30, 40 cents a square foot. So we're doing some really good, we're being cost effective on some of the treatments, and that's why we get some of the residents saying, why are you treating this road? It's 3 years old when we have failing roads, but we're trying to preserve that asphalt so that it can, push us out. In perpetuity, obviously, something major is gonna have to happen. So I guess we're not asking for, we're giving you information. We're not saying, hey, can we get $2.5 million next year? But it's just letting you know that over the next couple years, we will probably be asking for more money. And we'll be working with Alan and Wendy and the team to be able to say, okay, well, can we start using those B and C road funds a little bit more? That county option money is starting to come in a little more. And so we can start creeping that budget up.
That's that fourth quarter,
Well,
right?
can I clarify that though?
Yeah.
B and C road funds and county option cover our entire road maintenance program. So that covers the cost of our people and everything we're doing on the roads, not just slurry seal. So we are, and we're maintaining that all of that money is going to road maintenance right now. But it's covering the whole cost of our maintenance, not just slurry seals.
Yeah, sorry, thanks, Alan, and we did talk about that.
So can
So
I ask
nothing
you,
from our general fund is going to those.
Oh, yeah, we've got, yeah, we're far exceeding what we're getting in those funds.
Yes.
I thought, so maybe just clarify what you just
Yeah.
said, cause
Okay,
I understood what you just said, that to mean that the B and C road funds of the county option cover everything.
No.
You're saying that we're using
We're using all the
of
money
it.
they give us,
Yeah.
and it's not covering
So
everything.
And we actually have to prove that in our audit every year, that we're using that and what percentage is being used.
Can you speak to about what percentage of that $800,000 or $900,000 budget that is?
Well,
Of the entire
that's a
streets
little
budget?
question, because that's not our streets budget, that's,
That's just the slurry
Slurry.
budget?
yeah.
So when I
I was gonna say, I mean,
seem to be saying this a lot lately,
Our
I'm gonna say it a
road
lot
budget-
tonight.
Our road budget this year is 3.7 million. Our B and C road funds are $1.5 million. Our county option are 400,000. So we've got nearly $2 million of general fund going towards streets in addition to these monies that are set aside for roads.
And that's, the B and C and the county option is strictly maintenance anyway.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
from,
you can use B and C for construction.
so I guess our question is, mine was always gonna be, how much of that are we using for actual maintenance? When I first came on, it was, I guess, established that there would be 500,000 from the general fund every year. But I remember sitting through this presentation several different times with Ed and Monty, and my question was, well, with all the new roads that we're building, that has to increase at some point, isn't there some kind of formula? So it's good to have that increase. In 2019, I think was the last time we had a real discussion, we increased that to 750. So that's what we're paying out of the general fund to supplement. But the scary thing is that we're not going to keep up, right? And for me, jumping ahead to the budget, and I'll come back to this later in that discussion, this is the primary function of the city, right? Is to provide these services. So if we aren't providing these services, or we see that we can't, then we've got to take a look at the rest of the budget and make sure that the things we're supposed to be doing are taken care of first.
so I have a
My two
question,
cents.
Justin, so everything on this graph right here, it's in front of us, is based on that 70 PCI, because that's where we're at, average, correct?
It's saying that's what our current average is, and you
So-
can see, oh, go ahead.
So my question is ours is there, and we see the cost or estimated cost to maintain at 70%. I guess what is, to maintain our current level, but what's, I guess, the national accepted level of baseline?
So.
So if we slip to 60 and, and our budget starts to come up, but we're maintaining at 60, is that more in line? I mean, where does the 70 fall in line with what the
Yeah,
national
so-
average is?
Well, so I would say an overall national average is probably 50 or lower. I mean, you hear it all the time, right? Road infrastructure, it's failing everywhere. Salt Lake City has that same issue, it's failing everywhere. So I don't know that 70 is necessarily our target. If we could stay in the 60s, I would be happy.
Okay.
And so as you see that purple line, 65, right? So if we could try and get to where we're in that range, I mean, the higher we get, the longer we'll be able to preserve that road.
Right.
But if we can stay in that 60 and maintain that, I think we'd feel comfortable with that and feel like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
And that's really what I wanted to get to is 70 is a great mark.
Yeah.
But is it realistic to
Stay at
maintain that
750, we
70?
wouldn't have to do anything for
You know
2
what I mean?
years.
If that slips a little bit, but we're increasing our budget, does that really keep us in a good solid foundation moving forward.
Yeah, I think if we could get our budget up to where it's around that $2 million mark eventually, I think we'd be doing a good job.
And that's from the general fund, is what you're talking about.
That would be general
Only
fund,
source.
because that's really the only thing that could go through.
So, I just wanna be clear, right, cause we're adding in the numbers that Alan gave. What we're talking about here is just general fund, not including
Not
BNC
including.
and county option.
Well, BNC and county option are general fund money. But we're adding to that.
But for the purposes of this chart and this
It would be an additional
conversation,
2
it's
million.
addition to that.
Well, and again,
I'm not saying I don't wanna
if I'm,
use it for
if I'm looking at
credit,
the,
just wanna
the,
make
the
sure
solid green line is at 750, but we're already exceeding that, right? We did it last year and you're proposing to exceed that this year too, right?
Like I said, yeah,
So that green line with our increasing budget, pushing this out to, I'm hypothesizing 29 or 30 maybe, right?
Before we
it
drop
falls below
60.
60, right?
But this isn't putting in the new roads that are being added every year.
no, it's not.
Right, that's
This is like.
what
status
I'm
quo,
wondering, if
yeah.
this is this saying, is this projecting future needs, or is this just the current cost at the current needs at the current rate? This is what we're looking at, that's,
So it looked out 10 years, but it's saying that if we use 750 per year, that's where we'll be, but it's not identifying growth. This
Yeah,
is
see
our current road
the
structure.
growth is gonna be,
Yeah, but if we can put some of those,
But those
Fairly
new
inex-
roads might artificially actually keep us a little bit
Right.
higher.
the
than
mean
we-
would be
than
higher,
we
yeah,
really
that's
are. Yeah.
tell that to somebody on the 32 road,
so the goal would be over the next 5 years, we've actually, with this increase over the last couple of years, we've actually started to catch up with some of the roads, right? We're trying to treat roads every year, but we've been able to jump a couple years over the last few with the increased budget. And we project it'll be another 4 to 5 years before we feel like we're caught up with our seal coats, right? Not our major reconstruction, our mill overlays, or full depth reclamation. So if we feel like we can get caught up to within the next 5 years, then we can put those roads on a 5 to 7 year rotation. But then we can take some of those funds and go back and start addressing those failed roads, right? And try and take some of that and pick a road or two and be able to bring those back up.
And if we're treating the better conditioned roads at 11 cents a square foot versus 3 times that at 33 or more, obviously we're getting a lot more coverage out of it for our money's worth.
So, we got another question too, is, does different road materials, construction materials change the expected life of
Yeah,
a road?
it does, and over the last 2 years, we've modified that a little bit, our asphalt mixes and things like that are going down, so we've made some modifications there too, to try and help this, so.
Especially on the higher traffic roads, I know Riverton has done that on several of those roads, use the syncrete instead of.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm wondering is, there's obviously different expenses for the materials and stuff, but have we done an analysis of total cost of ownership over life, right?
Yeah.
Including maintenance and stuff, I think I'd like to understand which is the lowest overall cost, right?
Yeah.
And I think Jared just brought up a good point too, being able to understand the differences in maintenance costs and long-term over asphalt and concrete or syncrete too, where they've done that in some of those areas. That's something that we have very few of, and understanding where that may not be an advantage in some of these higher traffic areas.
Yeah, and we've discussed using concrete on those types of roads, and we can go into that in another time if you
Yeah,
want.
another time, but all information that'd be helpful. I can only cram so much in here at a time though, so.
We have the same issue, so. So yeah, like I said, this is just trying to get information so that as we go through future budget cycles, as we're asking for some more funds, then obviously this is competing with some of the other things, and obviously this will have to hit the priority list, but at least good information where we can have future discussions, so.
If you wouldn't mind, we go to that.
Yeah,
slide
the
again
overall
real quick.
map. Okay. Just a few slides first. Okay. So yeah, that's where our overall average there on the right, it's 69.8, but we just call that 70. And then you can see the percentage of each category of roads and how much of each road or each category we have of our network of roads.
So I'm going out on a limb here, but I assume most of the green are newer roads.
Right.
Right? And the yellow are ones that are probably in that 10-year-old range, and the rest are probably beyond that. I know the ones that I harp about all the time, the red and orange at the top left of that map, do lots of damage to my car. But with what you just described, right, it makes sense from a maintenance and budget point of view to put funds towards maintaining highly trafficked roads and keeping them in good condition. But if we completely ignore the red and orange, and even some of those yellow, they just continue to deteriorate, and then they end up on the capital projects list. And at least in my time, the 6 years sitting on this council, none of those have ever gotten funded. And they just keep getting worse and worse and worse. The red one up there, that's my neighborhood. And while guys have done a great job coming in and patching a lot, if any of those guys come in, they'll tell you they're like every couple weeks patching holes, right?
Just your summer, many color street.
Summer, winter, you name it. So at some point, like, when are we throwing good money after bad, and we just need to make it a priority? I know, budget's hard, but like we have to recognize that at some point, like if we choose that, you're gonna have to bite the bullet and pay.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between a 40 road and a 20 road, right? I mean, but even still, those red and we would call them, I guess, really deep orange roads are of concern, right? And
well, I'm not kidding. They're out there cutting and patching like every couple weeks.
Yeah,
I
and
would like to point out, we did get Houston done and all of that, so.
yeah, so this is a little outdated. 7300 West has been updated. McHouston's been updated. So this was again early 2020.
It's a small victory,
but
No, I'll take whatever
I think there is
absolutely. But my overall point is general budget. I don't know that I've seen that trend change at all.
Yeah.
And again, I'll bring this up later in the budget discussion. Is I think maybe the focus needs to be on providing these critical services.
But to your point, there's a balance, right? The more we allocate now, the fewer roads that will end up on the capital projects list, right? However,
there's competing interests.
Right, we have some urgent needs on the capital projects list that would preclude us
the
from
more we
those.
allocate now, the less we have to go towards those.
Yeah,
At least in my limited experience, what I feel like, and looking back over previous budgets, I've been asking my wife, I've got stacks of all the other budgets on my desk at home. Looking back over, I'm like, I don't know that we've really addressed these things, because in a fast growing city, some of the other stuff is just more fun, right? Or we think it's needed right now more than the things that are gonna cost us a lot later so just throw that on the radar.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of what Justin's trying to navigate, is how far can we go to catch up to getting those roads treated early, while also targeting those one by one, those roads that are in those poor conditions. So.
Okay, all right, anyone have any other questions for Bryce? Thank you, Bryce, appreciate that. All right, we will move on to item 2.3, which is our annexation area update. Chase?
Thank you. Before I would start, I just wanna say how grateful we are to have Bryce, how lucky. Cause he explained that even I understood what was going on in the dire straits, so.
I have to say, Monty and Ed did a great job.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
So, at the April 28th work meeting, council directed staff to begin the process of creating a committee or working groups to discuss potential annexation areas, specifically with regard to Olympia Hills. The discussion here that I'm hoping to have is just to, one, provide you a report of where we're at with that, get your feedback on what that looks like and how that would move forward. And then hopefully also identify, or have the council identify, some major topics in addition to the ones that we as staff have recommended to be discussed at these working groups with regard to annexation and potential annexation areas. So in your packet, I prepared a staff report that highlights what staff's process was here in creating what we're calling working groups. As we began to go through this process, we identified that there rather than having just one committee that sat down and discussed these items with developers of potential annexation areas, it would be more efficient to kind of break it down and categorize that committee into specific disciplines. And so what we've done is we've created a planning committee, and I'll go through what that committee what their functions are and who the members are on that committee. We've created a planning committee. Our second committee would be an infrastructure committee. The third would be a finance committee, and the fourth would be a master development agreement committee, an MDA committee. Again, as we went through this process, we identified what specific topics we might want to discuss as we engage in these conversations with potential annexation areas. And as we looked at that, we identified who our subject matter experts were. So with regard to the planning working group, we obviously have Michael Malloy, our planning director in the city, as well as Clint Spencer, who's our planning manager. We've identified a need to have Chief Carr on there to help us address, public safety planning issues that might come up. Blake Thomas, obviously our community development director, myself, Wendy Thomas, Tammy Moody, and then any of the subject matter experts that the developers would feel necessary to be a part of that meeting. Their primary functions and responsibilities for that planning working group would be to look at, what types of zoning based upon our general plan would be appropriate in potential annexation areas, types of uses that would be appropriate that carry out the goals and principles set forth in the general plan. And then this would be an important one as well, is to look at design guidelines and what a potential annexation area might look like at build out and how that would fit with existing designs within the city. The infrastructure working group, again, identifying who our subject matter experts were. Oh, and let me go back, I'm sorry, to the planning working group. As staff, we see an important need to have council members be present on these working groups. For that one, because of Council Member Smith's history on the Planning Commission, we thought it would be good to have him there. And then Mayor Watts also on the planning working group. He's expressed interest in design guidelines, among other things that we thought might help staff in those areas. Any questions? Actually, I'll take some questions on this particular committee or working group if you have any thoughts on that before I move on, or we could just save them all for the end, whatever you prefer.
Let's say keep trucking.
I'll keep it rolling.
Yeah.
With the infrastructure group, we have Jonathan Bowers and Justin Edwards who are heading that off, right? We think that they are our subject matter experts on this particular discipline. We've also assigned Councilmember Shields, and we have Council Members Orn and or Henderson on there as well. Councilmember Orn, she's got some water experience with her position on the board. Councilmember Henderson has identified, even in tonight's meeting, this need to address our problems with our streets. And this is a great discussion on the heels of what Bryce has just presented to us. We also have quite a large body from the staff on this particular item because there are so many disciplines that fall under the category of infrastructure. Again, we have Chief Carr to help us with some of the streets, the design standards. A public safety input we thought would be appropriate there. We've got Anthony Tusher, Heidi, Bryce, Blake, myself, Wendy, Tammy, and Alan Ray we've included in this one as well. Because development, as we know, involves a financial component with regard to revenues and expenditures as well as potential reimbursements.
Involves?
It is. It is the primary thing. So, and that's an important point we're gonna get to with the next working group with regard to finance. So his input we thought would be valuable there, as well as his simply presence to be involved in those discussions and know what is being talked about. And then again, any of the developers, representatives or experts that they think or we think would be helpful in engaging in those conversations with regard to infrastructure. The finance working group, this would be headed off by Alan Ray as well as Justin Sorensen, our two finance experts here in the city. Myself, Blake Thomas, Wendy Thomas, Tammy Moody, and then any of the developers' representatives. And we'd have Councilmember Henderson with his professional experience. We thought that would be valuable, as well as Councilmember Shields on that particular working group. the function of this finance group would again be to look at those items, the revenues, the expenditures, the levels of service, what those are going to cost. We received already from Alan a robust analysis based upon the data that we had back in February, I think that was. And obviously that will continue to evolve as we engage in these conversations about what a potential annexation would look like, and as we receive more data to supplement that report. The final working group would be the development agreement working group. That would be headed off by myself and the developers legal counsel. We also have on there Councilmember Clint Smith and Councilmember Sherry Orn. This group's a little bit different because this really wouldn't happen until the very end of the potential annexation. Right, all of these conversations with all of these other working groups would be culminated in a development agreement. And that would come over time as we received additional information, as we talked about these items, and as you as a council made ultimate decisions about what that should look like, if that is where ultimately this process leads. And to head all of that off, we have on the front page of my staff report what we're just referring to as a policy committee or an executive committee. That mostly just involves some of the administrators within the city, just to make sure that these meetings are happening on time, that the appropriate people are invited, and that all of this information is being processed and brought back to this body in this type of a meeting in this form. Obviously, with all those different people and all those different working groups, that would be hard for them to do on their own. So again, we've thought it important to set up this policy committee or executive committee to have some oversight of all of those sub-working groups. So that's kind of where we're at. That's our report on that. I don't know what feedback or thoughts you have with regard to the structure or the particular functions or the subjects that we're referring to within each of these groups.
So I have one comment about this. I think your comment was if any extra groups or subgroups. There's an aspect about this that I think is at the heart of everything that all of these groups are trying to get to, and that is a robust, public, transparent, communication of everything that's happening, so that there's just no questions, right? I want everybody to get as much information as possible. And so I appreciate that Tammy, her team will be in each one of these groups, but I don't know if it's necessary, but I think there needs to be a very strong focus on communicating what's happening in these committees to the public. And I don't know if that is, I don't know if our council meeting updates is sufficient for that. I don't know if we need to have additional communication. I don't know if we need to have summaries on our webpage or,
Can we ask,
that are
maybe-
published. I really wanna make sure this is, I really wanna get this.
We could go back and look at them.
Can we, I guess I'd just ask Tammy, hearing that, and I know you've already had some thoughts of what your thoughts and plans are in that respect.
Yeah, so we've actually been working on kind of a whole strategic plan for communicating all of this out, and we think that it needs to go into several communication channels. It can't just be a council meeting, it can't just be on the website, it can't just be in a newsletter, it has to be a little bit of everything. We think it's beneficial to send out mailers to the public so that every household actually receives information about why we're having these discussions. And basically gives updates and information on what each of these discussions entail. We really want to bring the public along on these discussions with us, not just give them an update every 2 weeks, but of course, it's completely up to you in how you wanna direct that. So we'll do whatever you would like us to do, but we do feel as a communications team that the more communication, the better. So.
Yeah, but I think to carry on with Jared's point is an accumulation of this material, right? So that there's an ability to check on how things have progressed and what kind of topics were discussed, and even allows council members who weren't a part of that group to go back. I wanted to hear what was discussed about that particular aspect and allow the public to do that too. I don't know if we can,
We're also
I
putting
don't know,
together
where
a
do we
web
put that, right?
page
A
where
web
all
page
of
so it's
this
all
will go.
listed and accumulated and organized so that everybody can go see what's happening.
So it sounds like that's what you're planning on doing.
Yeah, we're putting together a
this
web
specific
page where
webpage.
all of the pieces of this from our meetings will be pulled and then they'll be available on that webpage so people can go and listen to the discussions. They can see the notes that were taken, they can see the timeline, the progress. And we'll list out kind of some of the concerns that have been mentioned, so we just want everything on that page to be a full report. Then, of course, we'll give smaller ones through social media, always referring them back to that webpage. And then, of course, pushing it out regularly in mailers and in the newsletter.
Yeah, an authoritative source is much better than, half-spoken rumors that get
Right.
a lot of excitement,
To me, if it's gonna be public, it needs to be public, right? So they
Right.
need to be streamed and recorded, at each meeting. And then absolutely can give summaries and things, and I've talked with several people who've been involved with this stuff, cause it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, right? When I first got involved in all this, it was because of this stuff. And there were backroom deals being made, right? And we as residents felt lied to and cheated and whatnot, and we don't wanna go down that road, right? If we
Absolutely.
don't do it the right way, that's what the perception will be, and all we've done is publicly announce that we're making a backroom deal, right?
I think that's
So-
what we're all want.
So I think the main
Wanting to avoid.
thing, if it's gonna be open and public, it truly needs to be open and public, right? So recorded and live, so that people can see it and we can go back and see it. And then absolutely those other communication channels for summaries, cause I would like to think that there's few people that are going to torture themselves like we do and look through watch every minute and whatnot, but spend hours and hours, preparing for these meetings. But that's what we volunteered to do, but it needs to be there, for us and for others that are involved, but then we need the summaries and kind of the quick look from an authoritative source, not so-and-so posted something on a Facebook page or the local paper gave a blurb of this or that, and it doesn't cover the scope.
Well, I think each of us is, whether it's council members, honestly, planning commission members, staff, I think we all have to be very cognizant of, any of that information we communicate and always point back to to that authoritative source. So that everybody is directed to the same place and has all access to the same thing, because to your point, anybody can share something on social media and then someone else will run with it. And I think your point is very valid. We always need to point back to where it's all accumulated in one place and they can go and see that.
Yeah, I wanna reiterate this, again, to members of council, to staff, to the public, to everybody watching. I publicly announced in a council meeting way back after, we got Alan's presentation that, I intended to reach out and start some initial conversations. When those conversations turned from, hi, how are you, to, are we gonna talk about this for real? That's when, again, I specifically came back and said, I'm uncomfortable with this moving forward involving only me or a couple members of the council. That's not appropriate, and that's not really accomplishing anything. And so all of this effort is completely to get this as much, and again, I keep using the same words, open, transparent, robust, public engagement, council engagement, all the way along, so that there's no balls get dropped, nothing gets overlooked, nobody gets left out of the discussion, and it is, I don't know any other way to say it than is just as plain and open as it could possibly be.
Well, and to build on that, Steve, I absolutely agree with you, and that's why I'm very happy with what's been proposed here by staff in terms of, and as I thought about it from the initial discussion, say we want to create a work group, whatever you want to call it. That one work group could have had a tremendous load on them to work through all those details, and obviously staff, recognizing that as went through, and I think given us a very good plan of how to break that down into these specific subgroups and get the right people in the room to talk about it. And again, to provide as much information as possible. So I'll just say that for me, once I saw this and, the members that are proposed, how they've broken this down by subgroups and, the focuses out of each group in there, I just want to commend staff. I think that they've been very thoughtful in that process and how to do that.
I really respect that, the idea that, I mean, all council members have input, but, how Jared and I with our backgrounds working in finance, with having you and Sherry work on, infrastructure, I think that's appropriate application of our strengths to these relative, committees, I'm not comfortable talking about a subject matter expert when it comes to public finance, cause I don't know if anybody is. But Alan's pretty close, but I still think we're all like, I don't know how that works, this is just how it happens, right?
My wife doesn't even let me balance the checkbook.
Yeah, I
so.
get it, right? But that being said, I do think, the way that it's organized brings some of our individual expertises to support these subcommittees, I guess, so.
And I'll just say that,
Man, it's a lot.
I mean, I think a couple of us have had an opportunity to, I guess, meet in these groups. I know planning met yesterday. I think infrastructure
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that too, in just
Like
a
what?
second. So we,
started to formalize. So, yeah, like I say,
very high level discussions to say, here's what we're proposing with regard to these groups. What is it that you think we should talk about?
Yep.
So we met, on the sixth with the planning group, and really that conversation was about 30 minutes, and it identified some of the things that if we were to proceed down this road, what we would have to do as part of that.
Like agenda
plan.
item
It-
planning
very,
or something?
very high level agenda
Yes.
items for that group. And part of what I wanna discuss today as well is what you as a council think we should discuss, right? Looking at what we've done in past developments, what past development agreements have worked out well, what ones haven't, what we want to address up front, what things we need to anticipate, and even looking at what has already been approved in the county's development agreement with Olympia Hills, and using that as a potential reference to say, that is something we could work with, or no, this is something we need to get in front of, right, with these different groups.
So who else are already met?
The infrastructure group had one of those similar meetings, very high level, just identifying, in fact, I've got the agenda here.
Just
Right.
with just staff?
There was, so in those groups, the planning group has Councilmember Smith and Mayor Watts, they were there. And then the infrastructure group has Councilmember Shields, and then you or Councilmember Warren. That was an error on my part, I didn't invite Councilmember Warren, I thought when I sent the
I
invite
didn't
out.
get an invitation.
No, you did not, and that was again an oversight on my part. When we were setting this up initially, we had done it all and I didn't check to make sure that those invites had come out to you. So Councilmember Orrin has been invited to an infrastructure group tomorrow that she will be attending. We have Councilmember Shields at that, and I think again to avoid having a quorum present, having just two members of the council there would be advisable. So that's up to you to discuss who, again, this is our recommendation based upon, like I said, those professional experiences, your experiences on the
was
council.
like pretty good until right this moment. I think I agree with what Steve and Clint have said. This is a good start of suggestions of how to organize, but for meetings to have already taken place before it's been brought back to council.
That was the direction that we received, was to initiate that process.
To actually have meetings. I thought the direction was to give us this.
Well, and that was,
suggestions for
and maybe that
organizing
was a
these groups.
misinterpretation on our part, that was my understanding of the direction, was to come back with this. And we felt that it was appropriate to get the involvement of potential developers in those potential annexation areas to formalize this more thoroughly.
So the developers were part of these meetings that already happened?
They were. Yes.
Yeah, and again, I mean, we've
So
got
that's kind of where we just, I mean, and it's good to get this right now at the
Right.
beginning, that's where we total, at least in my opinion, that's a big problem, we've overstepped it already, these meetings are not public and open, and that, if anything looks bad, even if it's as innocent, and I believe it is just, hey, we just wanna get together and organize this. But even for a group that I'm potentially a part of, I had no idea, and there's no way, I mean, to go to a meeting the next day, like, we have jobs. We need to organize and talk about finalize who's gonna be on which of these, and then schedule these meetings so that we're able to attend them.
My understanding was, and correct me if I'm wrong, not that I'm trying to discount anything you're saying, Jared, I think it was to meet with the representatives from the developer side of it and to make sure, to lay out this foundation and make sure that they were good with it. There
Right.
wasn't any infrastructure actually talked about
No.
at that meeting, it was, this is the process that
Correct.
we're looking in to make sure that obviously, which they've agreed to.
Like I said,
Be
that's,
part
I
of
mean,
that.
it's, and I view it as fairly innocent, but that's where you gotta be careful, cause already that you're leaving the door open, right?
I wanna be really,
Cause one,
Careful here.
I didn't know about it.
there's no guilt or innocence when it comes to having meetings and discussions. I think that's really inappropriate language to be using.
Well,
There's no, there's,
I'll use a
there-
different adjective for you.
cause there's an
It
effort
was,
to be.
it was well-meaning, right? And, but I think it's that, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion now, so we don't go any further down that road where and I say we will get ourselves in trouble, right? We need to make sure that we have open conversations and that we're all aware of what's going on.
No, I agree. I'll agree with what Steve said too. I think the direction that staff received from the last time was to start formalizing this process, and you did that by having meetings.
Right.
Which is what my expectation was, so.
And I think that the agendas that were part of that should be included with these records and update, right? I think, our agenda had two things on it? Like, there was,
Very brief.
yeah, I mean, there was nothing on there. It was, we need to have another meeting and start picking through some things, right?
So what meeting did you attend? Cause they said they had one with the planning group, which was Clint and David.
You were infrastructure. right,
Infrastructure,
Steve?
yeah.
Yeah, on the sixth.
I honestly think there were two items on
But
the
that was
agenda.
the planning group on the
They
sixth.
both met on the sixth.
Oh.
And then, yeah,
Was Sherry there?
5-6 planning group. No, and again, I failed to invite her.
But then
I
Sherry
was
will
in
be
that
there.
Yeah,
for
once we
tomorrow.
caught
She
that,
just emailed me and said that she did get an invitation
Yeah.
today for the meeting tomorrow morning, but she can't be there.
I thought we had sent that out earlier. That's,
She emailed me back and said she was gonna attend,
should be okay.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that's gonna, this is emphasizing the importance of the administrative group to ensure that this kind of stuff is not happening. So I appreciate that insight and that suggestion to have a group that's specifically dedicated to administering this process to ensure that we're not missing these items and making sure that that is getting followed up on, because it is going to be a complex process.
So I guess maybe what I'm saying is, let's pump the brakes just a little bit and have this conversation, make sure we're all okay with these assignments, for one. Just for council members, if we're gonna be on these groups or not. I mean, Sherry needs to be a part of that. Is it her or me, or do we alternate? I don't really care. I actually like the suggestions with the makeup of the groups. But then to schedule meetings, how are we gonna communicate them? How are we gonna make sure that they're open? Were those meetings recorded? Right? So let's just maybe take a step back and
Well, I
and
think
lay the
from,
ground rules for how we're gonna do this, and then contact all the members, and then get those meetings scheduled.
I guess I have a question procedurally for you, Chase, in that, again, we're making sure that we're communicating all of this, but if a meeting, I guess, is going to be public, but we don't have a quorum there that requires noticing for that, I mean, just walk me
Yeah.
through that.
Well, I guess let me start with my recommendation, and then I can walk you through it. It would be my recommendation that they not be necessarily open to the public, but that the materials and maybe a summary of that be made public. It's my opinion, and I believe this to be true both professionally and on a principled level, is that if you open up every single discussion to everyone, it stymies open conversation.
And no, I don't think any of us want it to be open to public participation in every meeting.
But the recording of that meeting and making the recording public, I also believe would stymie that open dialogue between the city.
And that's where we run into, because that's what we're going for, right?
Will
Is
we
for
be
that open
required
dialogue
to
to
record every
be open.
development meeting
Yeah.
after that? Will someone have a ground to come in and say?
And one of the things,
There's an that's an important question. We need to understand that is, are we setting a precedent that every development meeting that
Yes,
comes in
the
with
same-
staff would then
it's the
have
same
to be
scrutiny.
recorded and done all over the place. I don't wanna make it, let's put it this way, I'm not asking for this to be a different process, but the fact that this is such a big item and it's such a hot topic, I am asking for a little bit of a different process, and I think we've gotten the buy-in from the developer and their subject matter experts to be involved in that more
I
public
agree
process
with you
too. Does
there.
that make sense? So
But
it's
it's what's-
different, but if we're all in agreement, then I think we can move it
It's
forward.
what, it's what's public, right? And I think that's what we've gotta agree on, so
But
you're
I
saying,
think
you're
making
saying
the
you don't think we
documents
should.
and the information public is honestly much more than we do in a regular development
A
meeting.
bubble plan or an infrastructure layout, as those items develop and as these discussions progress, those are gonna be made available. And
That's
with-
where it's dangerous, at
and-
least for me, talking, I mean,
And a thought I had too in this, and this would be up to the council, who's participating in each of these committee meetings and work group meetings, is to come back in a form like this and say, during this agenda item, I attended this working group meeting last Thursday, here's what we discussed, there are items available on our website to show you what it is that we talked about a little bit. If anyone has questions, obviously they can come talk to you individually, they can bring it up in the public comment section of a meeting, right? I think that form of transparency hopefully still suffices what it is we're trying to
I
accomplish
don't
with
think it's
making
enough.
this an open.
There's so
forum.
much distrust with the public, if it's been advertised as gonna be open and public.
But we can't change
It's gotta
that,
be
we
open
can't
and
change the
public.
process. Again, treat this one differently than we would any other development process.
We just said that we're going to treat it differently because it is different.
To my point is, I don't think, I agree with you, Jared. We are trying to make this very open and very transparent. My point is I don't think that we push that line to recording it in open meetings where we don't do that for any other development project. It comes through and goes through the same planning, the same
No,
discussion.
I'm not saying that it needs to
Rosecrest
be
and-
publicly
yeah.
noticed, right? I'm not saying it needs to be publicly noticed, but there's no reason why we can't record the meeting.
I think that the developer, I think there's information that's discussed in there from a development aspect, not that it has to do with how the decisions are made, but I think that there's information from the developer side that they would have an issue with as we go through those planning processes.
And it does create a record under GRAMA that could potentially, again,
Well, then, I mean,
and I'm not
No,
suggesting.
so as the community organizer, right? My first question is then, what do they have to hide? If you're wanting an open conversation and they're not willing to participate in the conversation, right? Cause you can have, if they wanna talk about details of money or what they wanna give here or there, that can be in a separate conversation. But when we're talking about these working groups,
But I think,
Like, all of
I
that
think
should
money
be
is
open.
part of that discussion, and I think that's where it can stifle that, the flow of those committees.
I wanna be clear about this. There is no intent to try and do this to alleviate suspicions of impropriety or unethical behavior on the part of the council. If our public believes that the council is engaging in unethical behavior, then they vote us out. That's insane. I believe that every member of this council is doing their damnedest to be straightforward and honest and act with integrity on everything they do. And to suggest that if a couple of members of the council are having a meeting and notes are being taken and agendas are being recorded and the information is being published and accountability is being had and multiple staff and council members are being present to have accountability to each other and to the public, that is anything less than completely robust, transparent, and acting with an incredible amount of integrity. And this is not,
And the fact that no
To say-
decisions can be made outside of a council meeting.
this isn't trying to say, well, we better do this so that we're not caught with our hands in the cookie jar. That's ridiculous.
that's already what is being suggested publicly. And perception is reality. So here's the only thing I'll.
Perception is
like,
not reality.
the-
I'm sorry, I have to disagree with
for-
that statement.
for-
Perception is not reality.
for people.
Perception is what
Let-
the public
Claire speak
The
for a
point
says,
second.
and
The point
I'm sorry.
the point I'm trying to make is that if we wanna truly do this openly and publicly and bring everyone along, it has to include all council members. Does it not? Like, we all need to be comfortable with this.
Absolutely. I think that's why it's been proposed the way that it has, to give each of us an area to be 100% participatory in based on our backgrounds, but then the opportunity to meet under these types of scenarios with these updates to be able to report back to each other and get the communications from our communications team and our executive team to provide us that update.
So I mean,
It's the same reason we don't all go to every committee and
This is, as
council that
you,
we're assigned to.
as you pointed out, this isn't the same as everything else. That's why you wanna do this differently, and I totally agree. As a council member, and you both just agreed a minute ago, I want to be able to go back and listen to those meetings. Your notes and your report is great, but I want to hear the discussion.
Again, I have concerns based on what Chase just said on the legal potential legal ramifications. Again, not to the city, but there has to be some respect and deference given to those that wanna be to the developer in that process, because they have to make a decision on themselves too.
And I agree, they don't have to say anything in those meetings that they don't want.
But then we're not gonna get anywhere in those meetings. If they don't have to say anything in there,
Then I'm confused.
then we're not gonna,
Well, then I'm confused what these are for. I mean, we're looking at zoning types of uses, design guidelines, existing infrastructure, new infrastructure, finance group, and this kind of was talking about the last meeting is, most of these things is for us to figure out on our end if it works or not. And then yes, at some point, sit down with them and compare numbers and see if we can come to an agreement.
But, and Jared, with respect to that, that becomes a chicken or the egg argument, right? You're trying to say, we need to know what the numbers are before we engage with them, but we can't know what the numbers are until we engage with them. Does that make sense? I mean, you can't.
Not really, because we
can't-
can engage with them and ask questions in those meetings, right? It's not unless I'm wrong, these aren't meant as negotiation groups, right? We're just talking about the nuts and bolts.
They can be,
Yeah,
at
So
the
if it
direction of the council if
So
we
if it
decide here.
turns to that, then I would agree, that needs to be separate, right? And then shouldn't be recorded and should be dealt with differently. But if you're suggesting that that's why none of these would be recorded, is the whole thing's a negotiation, then it's what I started out by saying, is it's just, you're officially saying, hey, we're doing a backroom deal.
no, I completely disagree with that. We are not, when you have all the members of staff there, a couple of members of council, all of the members representing the development team, that is not a secret meeting or a backroom deal. It just isn't. This right here, this is the public process that it has to ultimately go through in order to move forward with an annexation. We have to do, and we have to be willing to do all of the legwork and call it negotiations, call it fact finding, call it whatever you want. We have to do the legwork to make sure that at the end of the day, the city and the developer both agree that this is the right path to go down. And the only way to do that is to dig into the nuts and bolts and to have those hard conversations, quite honestly, in order to be able to come out in the public process, which is here at this meeting, and to lay it all out on the table once we go through that difficult stuff. But I really don't like the insinuation that having 10 people comprising of council members and staff and the developer at a meeting is a backroom deal.
Here's the conversation that's gonna be had, and you're gonna see it, is that if you're not willing to let people hear that conversation, then we have to wonder what it was. Here's my suggestion.
That's why we have
My-
notes and
my-
agendas and everything else.
Well, isn't that cross purposes of what we're trying to achieve? Right, so my suggestion is, shouldn't there be a middle ground? Where most of these should be able to be recorded, no problem, and if the developer has an issue with something that's on there, I will be the first to defer and say, it's fine, we can talk about that at a different meeting when that's not recorded.
I think to your point, I think we pushed it clear to that side of transparency as far as we really can without now infringing on other aspects of
Cause
of
I'll-
law.
I- 'cause I'll
can't
tell
think
you-
there's not another process that we have ever gone through as a city that's ever involved this, that's ever talked about, let's accumulate all of our meeting notes and
Right.
materials and information and record it and compile it and publish it publicly and have updates about it every single meeting.
The
I mean,
job,
nobody's ever done that before.
the job of staff and of council is to have those hard conversations, to make those, to be able to get to the point to where we can actually make a recommendation and go through a public hearing process and take a vote.
Yeah, and if
Those-
the
those
idea
are
is,
the hard
if the
conversations
idea is we
have
wanna
to
have these open, public, robust, fully recorded, transparent meetings, to just say, okay, if we're gonna talk about that, then we need to go into another meeting. Then people are gonna, then
I
by
guess
your
we have
definition,
I guess
if
we
there's
have-
ever a conversation that happens that isn't recorded and streamed, that's a backroom deal.
That's a backroom deal.
And that's just simply not true.
I
So-
agree.
So here, and we can disagree, but here's the thing with this sort of thing. If you push forward and one council member, or I'm gonna assume two, aren't on board, and I have to publicly tell people, I don't feel that this is the right way to do it, I don't feel that it's open and transparent as it should be, what does that do to the process?
I guess my question back to you, Jared, would be, is that, honestly, is that your intent to just not go through a process if it can't be your way, when we are trying everything we can here to be as completely transparent as possible within the bounds that we have? If it doesn't go your way, is that going to be your position? That it's, are you gonna go out there and
I
tell
don't
that the
think
rest of the
that's-
council is being unethical?
I don't think that that's the right way to characterize it. What I would have to say is what I normally do is give my reasons. Here's what I suggested and how I feel it should work. If these are the things that are being discussed, this is what I would be comfortable with. I was outvoted, and that's fine, but I'll have to tell people that.
I think that would be an unfortunate way to treat the rest of your council members who are trying everything that they can.
No. That's
To
not
be
treating you.
transparent.
That's
No,
not
no,
how I'm
it is.
treating you
It
at all.
absolutely
No, no,
is.
It
but
doesn't
you're-
matter
no, no.
treating members of the council, it's a matter of treating the council.
It's a matter
This
of,
is a
I don't
deliberative
represent
body.
the council. I represent the residents. That's who I answer to, right? And when there's a statement made that council gave direction, that was a 3-2 direction.
It was still direction.
Right.
If we're a majority
And that's
council.
fine. And so when people ask me, I have to answer them.
Okay, but just because we're
I'm telling
not-
you,
we're-
there's a way we can do
I
this
know,
together,
but we are
bring us
not,
along.
we are not a consensus council.
That's what I'm pointing out.
And so
we're
if the
at a fork
majority,
in the road.
how many
If you
times
wanna-
so, but
if you wanna
my
do it,
question
you
is,
can.
my question is, Jared, though, is how many times has there been a vote that you voted against that you're gonna continue to languish on when a vote is made, we are a majority council and we make a vote and we're done and we move on, whether it's a zoning condition or whatever.
I am
How long-
accountable to my residents. And when they ask me, how did that happen? Where do you stand on that? This says that the council agreed. Did you vote for that? I'll have to tell them no, and here's the reasons why.
Okay, you can tell them no, that you didn't vote for it, but
The
you,
record will state that as your vote on the record, so that will be there.
Yeah, and I communicate, I don't know if the rest of you do, but I communicate as much as I can with my constituents.
I think it's unfair to characterize or to say that if we proceed down this path with what staff has outlined, at, again, the direction of the majority of the council, to turn around and say that.
I'm asking if you want to do that. That's the point that we're at. Is there a middle ground?
So you're
that we-
giving us, essentially, you're giving the rest of the
I'm
council
asking, is there,
an
are you willing to
ultimatum.
come my way this bit? I know Sherry,
I think-
Sherry
Again,
feels the same way.
I think that my
We
statement was.
We want to have this open and public
And I
dialogue,
think-
and that's what was talked about last meeting, was that we would
Chairman
use these
Smith,
to
can
be
I have the floor when you have a
recorded,
minute?
et cetera.
Yes, let me make one comment, then I'll give it to you. I think, my comment is that I think we have pushed it as far as we legally can without crossing the line as provided direction by our council. I think we have gone as far as we can with the full intent of saying we want this to be as transparent as possible. And so, again, that's as far as I can go. Go ahead, Mayor Watts.
All right, so I appreciate this very robust discussion that we've been having. I would like to give my direction to what I would like the staff to do, and then I will let the other council members can chime in on whether or not they agree with that direction. The direction I would give to staff at this point is that I would like to move forward with the plan that's been presented to us. If there is any council member who feels uncomfortable with the recommendations for the boards that they have been assigned to, that they are welcome to make that known, and we'll happily have that discussion in a future meeting. But moving forward, we move forward with that path that has been discussed. I'd also direct staff to put a future agenda item on one of our next meetings in regards to communication from the council in regards to annexation and Olympia Hills, so that we can have a discussion regarding how to ensure that the official communication from the council is a process that has been decided upon by the body, and that we can make sure we stay within those constraints. Anybody outside of that is welcome to comment on whatever their individual statements are, but that way we have a clear plan for staff in regards to what our communication plan is in regards to annexation in Olympia Hills. That would be my direction to staff. I would like to see what other council members feel.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. I'll just say I agree with you on the communications plan. I think that, again, as we have made it abundantly clear that we're trying to be as open and transparent as possible through a process. And I made this comment earlier, I think all of our communications have to point back to one central point. But I do like your thought of having an outlined communications plan of how each of us make sure that happens. So I don't have any problem with that. In terms of your thoughts and your recommendations on proceeding as outlined here, and then obviously if there's council members that are uncomfortable in participating in the committees as outlined, then certainly they can certainly make that known, and that can be made available to other council members that can hopefully attend in that spot. So I would go along with that recommendation.
Yeah.
And we should wrap this up. We're about 25 minutes past time.
I'll go as quick as I can. I have individual conversations with every member of the council about really important topics, agenda items, issues that are before the city all the time. I've gone to your house, you come to my house. I've had long conversations with Clint on the phone. Sit out here in the hallway talking to people. I mean, it is part of our process to engage in conversation about all of these things. None of those are recorded. None of those are made public. That's just not what happens.
Those are conversations, not
right.
committee meetings.
Well, again, not every committee meeting I go to, not every council meeting that I go to. I mean, I serve on, Association of Municipal Councils, the mosquito abatement. They're open meetings, right? But they're not.
We obviously just aren't gonna agree on this point, so it's gonna be up to you.
So let me finish this. This is an extraordinary effort and attempt to exceed any level of transparency that it applies to anything the city has ever done, because it is Olympia Hills. It is one of the most sensitive and hot topics in our community. We all recognize that. And so this is an effort to again, this will be the most transparent process that has ever happened in the city of Harriman. To suggest that every single meeting and discussion that goes along with that is somehow subject to a level of.
That's not what has been suggested. It's not.
That's what you're suggesting.
No, I'm suggesting that these official meetings be recorded. Have whatever other conversations you want. That's the difference. That's what I'm saying.
Again, then what you're saying is.
Can't you see that part to bring us along?
No, because what you're doing is you're just making a whole nother set of meetings that are going to be private and not recorded and not made public, where all the material that is sensitive is gonna be discussed. I mean, it's just saying.
I have a totally different idea of what these are gonna be then.
It must be. I just can't figure out why debate in our council meetings, analysis of our council meetings, report from the committees, minutes from these meetings, published, compiled, is somehow,
Not enough.
yeah, I can't accept that.
I can't.
It is beyond, and then to say that out of these meetings would come more meetings then those will be the secret backdoor meetings is ridiculous. These are
I'm not suggesting that either. If there's conversations that, because this all comes down to, you're saying the developer's they're probably not comfortable with it. If there's something there, they don't have to say anything they don't want to in these meetings.
But
I'm not comfortable with it.
Let's be very.
Because if I'm gonna
yeah.
light somebody up over something, I want it to be behind closed doors. And then when it comes out,
I've done it with
we'll
this
get it
particular
done.
developer before with the cameras.
But I mean, let's be very clear.
Isn't it better to bring
there's
us all along?
I can't
think we're
understand
trying
how this- Yeah,
I don't understand
think
how
to
we,
suggest
like,
that it's not being
10
done, I
minutes
think
ago,
is just totally.
10 minutes ago, we were in total agreement. And all it was said from a legal point of view is that there would be a record that's grandma. That's it, that's the only difference. He's not saying that legally we can't.
His recommendation was that we
That
shouldn't.
we shouldn't. That's what his recommendation
Not that we
was.
can't, but that we shouldn't.
Right, because there's that record there, and negotiations
So,
are
yeah.
negotiations. I'll agree when it comes to negotiations, but my understanding of these meetings is that we're talking about nuts and bolts, not negotiating.
I think it's all of the above.
It's,
Let's be clear. We have a developer who, at this point, is still very much deciding whether they want to annex into our city. There's a lot of things. So you bet they're gonna come in and talk about the nuts and bolts, and there's gonna have to be some negotiating on details of the MDA agreement or design standards or whatever it is.
Sure.
They are very much on the fence still of whether they want to come in, just as much as we don't know if it's 100% beneficial for us. And I think that's where those hard conversations have to be had. And by saying that we have to record every single one of those, that is outside of the scope of anything that we've ever done on an annexation negotiation before, regardless of if it's highly publicized or not. I just don't think that we go and I think we have changed the process. I've spoken my piece,
So I'll take a step back and say the communication plan is gonna be of utmost importance. Before moving ahead with these meetings, which apparently have taken place already without council members knowing, let's get the
I think you're trying to, can you please quit
wrong to say that.
mischaracterizing that? It was an oversight. He's admitted it was an oversight. He's apologized. It happened, things happened.
to
Jared.
suggest that that's
Just let
like
it
being
go.
done
It's
circumventing
not.
council is so
oh my gosh,
not
you guys,
fair.
you're putting words in my mouth. I said we've already, so just, it's a misstep is what I said, right? A mistake, absolutely, that's what a misstep is. Let's not make any more.
It was my first one, by the way, ever.
And I haven't told them you're terrible, how dare you, saying, we need to be really careful about this. This is gonna be really scrutinized, right? So one, we all need to be on board. I can't speak, Sherry told me to speak for as much as I could with the call over here, but I don't feel comfortable speaking for her and everything. But I'd like to say that what I guess what I expected was to talk about these tonight and formalize a communication plan going forward and then get these scheduled and talk, and with each one break down what particular topics we're gonna pick off and when and how, et cetera.
Well, so, and I appreciate
So rather
that.
than
I think
full steam
that
ahead,
one thing that has to be
What's
recognized,
the communication?
I think that one thing that has to be recognized though, Jared, is that there is a timeline to all of this happening. To say that we're gonna wait till we have a communications plan that details everything out in order to start having some of these high level meetings, knowing that we have a timeline in place is probably not going to sit well for the potential developer of the annexation. I think we're trying to do all of these things in concert to really get the process moving. So what I would ask, and we really need to end this and go into our regular meeting, what I would ask is short of, obviously, Tammy's already said that she's going to bring us back a robust communications plan. Is there issue with the members and who has been assigned to what committee on here that we need to make changes to and give council, or excuse me, staff direction to continue moving forward in this manner with these groups? Because when those groups meet, I think they've done a good job of identifying the high level things they're going to discuss. in each of the function of these groups here. And then when those groups meet, they start to drill down to the meat of the things that need to be talked about specific to this development, and these things are identified.
And I would say my direction would be that I like how these committees have been organized. I like the people that are appointed to the committees. I like the topics that those committees are gonna be discussing, and I think that they're appropriate. But I also wanna say that I am supportive of committees that have never been created before for any process.
Yep.
I am supportive of communication about something that has never been done before. I am talking about recording and publishing that information, which has never been done before. I am talking about every 2 weeks having this as an agenda item that we discuss and report on, which has never been done before. We are doing something in the effort of informing the public that has never been done before. It is an attempt to do the most open, transparent, and involved communication about a development that has ever happened. No other city does this, and Harriman has never done this in 21 years. So with that being said, I would support we move forward with this.
Jared, anything to add?
What does move forward mean?
Have the meetings. I think it's organized well, and I think we start having the meetings, and whatever the content of those meetings are, we make notes about it and we report it back to all the rest of the council. That's.
Chase has a quick comment.
To answer your question, Jared, I think what might be helpful for staff as we work through this process based upon this direction is for us to come with a list of items that we think you might want to address based upon previous discussions with development as a whole. Then also for the benefit of staff, either in a meeting here or independently sending items that you think we should also address. I mean, I think it's important for the transparency piece to have those discussions in the open in a public meeting to say, these are things we want to talk about in these subcommittees and identify those. But based upon your direction, we will also prepare a list of items that from previous policy decisions that you've made, could be potential talking points in these working groups.
Good point.
I mean, you're
Thanks,
saying
And
Chase.
so.
specifically what the communication plan is going to be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
with
already been
regard-
given.
with regard to those
Yep,
items.
that's already been given.
I voted on the rest, obviously, but the meeting tomorrow for the working group that Sherry or I are supposed to be a part of, neither one of us can attend. I didn't know about, can we change that date?
So Councilmember Orrin has told Blake that she will be there. She'll be the part of it or all of it. I
Can
can't
we
remember.
actually work on that detail
Yeah,
outside
I
of this?
She
Yep.
spoke to me right before came and asked me if I could go, cause she can't be there.
We'll work on that detail outside of this, so.
Can I have the floor?
Yes, go ahead, Mayor.
I'd like to make a motion that we move out of our work meeting into our general meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn into our regular meeting.
Second.
A second by Steve, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right.
Aye.
Thank you, we will adjourn